Right on cue.
Still the old intro.
Let me see if this works.
Welcome to the Grappling With podcast. Dr. Chris Hardy and William Walker will take a deep dive into topics covering wellness and prevention, performance, recovery, and injury management. Our mission is to provide the latest science-based information to help you get the most out of your grappling journey, both on and off the mats, and help you overcome any challenges you may be grappling with. Dr. Hardy is a licensed physician and BJJ practitioner, but the contents of the podcast are meant for educational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. Please seek out personalized care from your own medical provider prior to implementing any medical treatment or intervention.
What up, man?
Hi.
On our rainy Memorial Day weekend.
Yes, we are fresh from an open mat.
Yeah?
Feeling good.
Yeah, I did.
I was not feeling good.
Yeah, Olivia begs to differ.
Yeah.
I am tired and want to take a nap.
Excellent. Well, you'll want to take one even more after this episode, I think.
Somebody's got a case of the grumpies.
Case of the Mondays, except it's not Monday, it's Sunday.
It's so classic.
I'm sorry, that was really
No, that's a great Office Space reference. I like it. Yeah, I'm just sore from Saturday, and then I did some workout today that is going to be the subject of our podcast. You like that segue?
I do.
Pretty slick.
What are we talking about today?
We're going to do a little mobility stuff today.
Okay.
And we're going to say, what is that anyway?
Yeah. I think of jump rope, jumping jacks. That's about my mobility thoughts.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. Anything that we did in PE.
really?
Elementary school.
Is that really what you think?
That's what first comes to mind. If I really dig a little deeper, then I get, I think, a little bit more into like jiu-jitsu movements. But, touch butt in the park. Ito Portal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is a offshoot of it.
Is he legit? Like he's
Ito Portal is, yeah, for sure.
He just kind of got a bad rap because he's goofy a little bit.
He's eccentric. Well, he was definitely smart and really impressive what he can do.
And Nate Diaz just said something funny about.
Well, it's hilarious, dude. I mean, come on. That's a setup for a comment, right?
Yeah.
If I was doing shit like that, you'd be like, really?
I'd say it to you.
I know. What are you
Where's
doing
your
over there,
ponytail, bro?
Well, yeah, bro. Your man bun is missing. I can't even grow one anymore.
Oh, you could. It's just called something else.
It'd be called in bad taste. It's what it'd be called.
It's called a skullet.
I know you're probably going to touch on this, but I just thought of something. What's the difference between mobility and flexibility?
It's almost like I planted you there and planted that question. That's the first thing we're going to talk about, actually. What is it, right? And
Did you tell her that?
No, I promise you.
I recently learned that there is a difference.
Yes.
Because I think people confuse the terms all the time.
We do, and that's one of the things I want to talk about today, and why. And after that, why it's important to us as grapplers, especially. So, you already said what you think of with mobility, right? Olivia, how about you?
Mobility. I mean, just being able to maybe. I'm going to just...
No, I love it. That's what I want.
Move through the full range of motion of, I don't know, what would you call it, joint or muscle or...
Yeah, joint. So we're talking about a joint, right?
Okay, joint.
Ability to... So the difference, let's just start with the difference between flexibility and mobility.
Okay.
So if I had Bill laying on this table on his back, one leg down, and I'm doing, you've seen people do the assisted hamstring stretch, right? Where we're kind of we have one leg pinned down, we're pushing the other one up.
It's like a butterflies thing.
Yeah, exactly, like scissors, right? Yeah. And he'll reach a point where he won't go any further, where you feel that muscle tension. With me assisting him like that, that is flexibility. It's a kind of a passive thing, okay? Whereas mobility is being able to actively move yourself through a range of motion. Does that make sense?
No assistance.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And being able to control, more importantly, control that range of motion. Not just can someone push me into that motion.
So, because I think you said this to me, I have good mobility.
You
not
do.
necessarily flexibility. Not that I have bad flexibility, but in some areas I do. but I have good mobility.
Yep.
And that can be often confused.
It can, because there are people with incredible flexibility, you've probably seen, like contortionists and things like that.
Right.
Typically, those people, they're really bendy, but they can't really control that with any kind of strength through those ranges of motion. Is what, it's really kind of what we mean, like owning a range of motion is what we call it. So basically, that goes back to the whole stretching thing, right? Where we've heard over the years, okay, stretching is good, stretching doesn't do anything. I don't know if you've heard this, but those of us that have been in the strength and conditioning,
And different kind of stretching too.
Uh-huh.
I don't, not getting too
No, you're
into the
fine.
weeds, but
yeah,
static stretching
right.
before a workout compared to like oscillating movements.
What they call dynamic.
Okay, dynamic stretching. I always, when I played baseball back in the day,
Yep.
we did static stretches primarily before. But I remember going to MLB games, like Major League Baseball games, and they're doing like, same with football. They're walking but doing little movements to get everything going, and then they would stretch. And I find we're not really taught that. We're taught to just, okay, lean over and hold.
Right.
And just sit there and hold this stretch, feel the stretch, rather than what I have found is, and part of it's, through you, of course, is like when we're doing a stretch, like moving in a stretch, hitting the muscle at different angles, like even like a Cossack squat, which is where you kind of, if you don't know what that is, it's like where you lean off to one side and look like you're doing a kung fu move or something.
Yeah. You go to one side with one leg's in a full squat, the other one's out to the side, almost in a side split.
And you can either like turn your toes up or you can keep your foot flat. I find starting with the foot flat and then rotating so the toes are up while I'm in the squat. I know you want to keep your heel down for certain parts, but I like to lift my heel up and actually point my knee forward and just feel all these pieces.
There's a lot to that, because you're trying to hit all those angles of that joint that it can go through as much as possible. The question is, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's where the arguments come into place. The biggest thing we've seen in the literature for the longest time is static stretching doesn't prevent injury, right? And there's
static stretching does not prevent injury. That's what the literature says.
That's right.
Okay.
But it depends on how you do it and what your definitions are. What is stretching? Does just kind of that holding? Because think about this. Here's a better example. What am I doing to the muscle? Have you guys ever thought about that? When I'm in my stretch, what are we trying to gain from that, in your mind, from your experiences growing up or whatever? What has been kind of the why are we doing it?
I want to hear what Liv says, but I think my mind just thinks of it maybe our muscles are a little balled up from being static throughout the day or whatever, and we're intentionally pulling, like almost like when you put cheese on a hamburger and it starts to melt on there, and then you start pulling it apart and it got those strings, like you're just kind of stretching it out a little bit. Bad example.
No, it's not, because you're actually feeding into a really interesting, some terminology I'm going to go over here in a second.
What do you think, Liv? Like, what do you think about what are we doing to our muscles?
Like when I was a kid?
But
right
just in general?
Not only what, but what is the goal? What is our goal?
I'm assuming to lengthen or...
That's what you hear all the time, to lengthen, right?
Yeah.
And then thus, they think, okay, if I'm more pliable, we call that viscoelasticity. Okay, is what the idea is. The viscous part is what you were talking about, where the cheese melts, right? It's viscous, it melts out. Can you get that cheese to go back, though?
No.
Okay. That's the elastic part. The viscous thing is deformation. In other words, it was a piece of cheese, now it's spread out. The elasticity part is it going then back to where it was. Okay. So muscles have this property called viscoelasticity, and I'm not going to get down into the molecular aspects of it. It's actually quite fascinating how it does it. But it has properties of both. The problem is it's short-lived. When we try to lengthen something, are we lengthening tissue? And that's the question.
What's tissue?
The actual tissue itself.
Is that skin?
The
or is that muscle?
the muscle, the connective tissue, the whole 9 yards.
Are we lengthening it?
Yeah.
I would say no.
Yeah.
Because it's already as long as it is. It's just contracted at that
Are
point.
you just improving its whatever?
Viscoelastic properties.
Yeah, are you just improving
Yeah,
that?
no, you're not improving it. But when you do that, you get a temporary viscoelastic reaction, but it doesn't provide lasting. It doesn't provide more length in a muscle. That's completely wrong. So, but if you ask someone, what is the goal? What are you trying to do? They're like, well, I'm trying to get more flexible, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to try to increase your ranges of motion through static stretching, which long term doesn't really work too well. It's because those effects are temporary. Have you ever done, I'm going to get to the whole point of here soon, but have you ever done something called PNF stretching, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, where someone, let's use that example we had, if you were laying on the table, one leg up, and we're trying to stretch your hamstring, quote unquote. And then I say, hey, Bill, we're at your in-ring range. I want you to push back against me. Have you done that kind of stuff ever with someone?
Yeah.
And then sure enough, you push back against them for about 10 seconds.
And they just hold it.
And they hold it, and then you go a little further.
Mm-hmm.
So that is actually a neurological reaction, okay? Where your brain will give you another 15% after that. And I'll tell you why that happens. But that also, let's say I get you that extra 15% of motion. And then I come back the next day, do you still have that 15% right away? No. And that's the point. It's temporary. The idea of mobility to true mobility is we want to increase it so you have more usable range of motion over 6 months, where you were 6 months ago, let's say you're 30 degrees more routinely without having to kind of build up to it again. And that's kind of what I want to go after with mobility today in this lecture. Sorry, I hate using the L word in the podcast today. I know you're like snoozer. I'm gonna turn you off. But let's talk about.
Okay,
go ahead.
If you're doing that kind of stretching, what was it called?
PNF, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation.
If that's your stretching method,
yep.
So you can make that 15% can become your normal, but so you can increase it to where that extra 15% is now your standard, and you can get 15% again, right?
Not through that method.
Not through that method.
No, but that's a temporary method. Is my point. I was using that to illustrate. Why is that? Did all of a sudden that muscle lengthen by 50? I mean, connect? It didn't. And we're going to talk about what that is, and then how to make that.
How to get that
as your standard. So then you have that usable range right away.
And this is all applicable, not just grapplers, but for your weightlifters and all this kind of stuff.
Sports, and oh my God, there's so many applications to this. It's incredible. Baseball, golf. I mean, you're opening up these usable ranges of motion.
Does yoga use whatever it is you're talking about? Because that seems to be
the problem. Is to an extent they're holding poses, but there's a piece missing from that in most practices. I'm not going to make a blanket statement at all of that because there's many applications of yoga and position, and I'll explain why that can. It can help with flexibility, but many of these yoga folks, I'm not saying all, but many of them can't control those with strength through a mobility, and they'll probably try to argue with me, but it's been studied.
What's the difference between having strength with a stretch versus is it active versus
passive?
Yeah, passive.
Yep. And we're gonna talk about that very subject.
Okay.
No, it's a great question. So let's first bring it back. Let's use our first example with Bill laying down and me. I'm going to slowly raise one leg, right? Till I feel that part where it starts resisting. What is that?
The resistance?
What's causing that? It's a rhetorical question, but I mean, have you thought about that?
I mean,
It's your central nervous system.
Yeah. Why?
Doesn't feel safe.
Protection.
That's right. It's exactly right. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to gain more usable range of motion, but we do this because what you're encountering when we stretch Bill out and we feel that resistance is called a stretch reflex. Okay? The medical term or the physiologic term is called myotatic reflex. You don't need to know that. Just call it stretch reflex. So what happens, and this is really interesting, it's worth talking about what the nervous system is doing. And it all has to, and guess what? That stretch reflex sensitivity is why some people are more mobile and some people are not. Because it's a protective response by exactly what you said, because the nervous system does not feel like whatever you're doing is a safe range for that. So when we're talking about when we run into that barrier, so to speak, what's happening is you have these things within the muscle, and I'm going to use the word longitudinally. In other words, they're put in line with the muscle fibers in this direction of pull. They're called muscle spindles. You heard me talk about those before?
Probably.
Okay. If we have any general muscle, let's say your hamstring, imagine we took little pieces of string that were stretchable and we embedded them along the axis of the muscle, right in line with its direction of pull. So when I'm opening that up and that muscle is lengthening, those little strings will lengthen as well too, right? Can you visualize that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then when you shorten the muscle maximally, the tension comes off of them. Okay. If that's how it worked. I mean, it's a little more detailed than that, and I'll explain that in a minute. But anyway, what those little strings are muscle spindles, what they are, they're receptors embedded in the muscle. So as it detects stretch, it sends a signal to the spinal cord, which then the spinal cord sends a signal back to the muscle to have it contract. So it's a loop. So as that little muscle spindle is stretching with the muscle, it's sending a signal to the spinal cord like, hey, this is stretching, we got to protect it. So then it sends us, the spinal cord sends another neuron called an alpha motor neuron back to the muscle to contract it. And that's what you're feeling as you kind of put on the brakes there. As I stretch you, that tension is that feedback loop. Mm. That stretch, that's called the stretch reflex. The stretch reflex now can be different types of sensitivity. And if we're allowed to bypass that stretch reflex, is what we're doing with that PNF stretching, we're temporarily bypassing that. We're tricking the nervous system basically with that. We're putting pressure on it, you're activating the muscle, and then for a small amount of time, that reflex lets go a little bit and you're able to get a little more motion. But it won't stick because you haven't given the nervous system a reason for it to become permanent. Mm. So the whole idea of mobility training, and we're going to talk about how to do this, is to keep setting that stretch reflex, we're adjusting it so it's not as active, right? So then we can push further and further and further before it's activating. Okay, does that make sense so far? Yeah. There's another component of this, people listening that are into muscle physiology. There's another little innervation called a gamma motor neuron that hits that muscle spindle itself. As you're shortening, it will also keep tension on it while the muscle's shortening, so it can maintain tension and still can give you information about the length of the muscle. If that wasn't there when the muscle shortened, otherwise that thing would just kind of lose its tension. Like a string. You can imagine a string losing tension. So this other thing kind of keeps that tension on as it shortens. It's called a gamma. It's a gamma feedback loop. You don't need to know that, but just to be complete.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do we adjust this stretch reflex? And that's the question. That is the basis of the system that Andrew and I have been training under, that functional range system, Dr. Spina. Right. Absolutely a brilliant system. He's basically taken a bunch of research, put it together in just a really, really cool kind of program.
Yeah.
Very systematic approach to kind of doing this. And you probably know from what we're doing now that you're a brown belt, for a couple, year or so, you go to warm-ups again.
I do.
As a purple belt, I know you were gone. So,
it was kind of blue-purple.
It was blue purple, right?
Yeah.
But now that you probably notice that we do these things called pails and rails, right? You heard us say that, where we'll do. That's where we're getting this from, because we're trying to actually increase mobility. And the idea behind these things is we're trying to build strength in these new ranges. And using strength training protocols. So as I open at your end range, I want to start building strength there. Then what happens over time is the nervous system goes, oh, I'm strong in this position. I can let that stretch reflex go a little bit more. Then I keep building strength in the new range. And we keep doing it so until the stretch reflex is, you've gained a whole bunch of usable mobility. So where before, if I had you at full stretch, you have very little force capability.
Yeah.
We're trying to build your ability to generate force in these end ranges of motion.
So is the cars, like the shoulder cars?
A little different.
Okay, not the same.
That's working on the capsule itself. That's a whole nother thing we can talk about.
The pails and rails, is that, which one?
I'll explain that, which I'll give you some examples. So first of all, the terminology, pails, it sounds weird. All that means is progressive angular isometric loading, okay? Progressive meaning we're moving through, we're progressing. Angular, we're progressing the angle of opening of that joint. Isometric is the type of strength training we're doing, and that's the isometric loading is what that means. Excuse me. And the rails is the regressive side, and I'll give some examples on that to make it more understandable. So to do this, let's switch from the hamstrings. Let's talk about the side splits. The adductor muscles. The one I tore.
Like normal splits.
Yeah, the one where we're standing up and with the splits go to the side.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is perfect.
Yeah.
When it comes to splits, if you can do the splits, like the side splits, like Van Damme.
Middle splits?
The what?
Middle splits?
Is that what that is?
Whatever you want to call it, middle splits, yeah.
Oh, okay. Where they go out sideways?
Yep, sideways, out from your body.
Yeah, Van Damage.
Yep.
So if you're able to do that,
Yep.
is it required that you do that when you go to a bar
Yes.
or a dance club? Like
No,
you have to do it.
You
there.
have to do that, and if you can do a one-legged a squat, a pistol, you got to do that too. That's just part of it. So you can show them,
I know
what's
someone that I've known him for a while.
Okay.
You could even say since third grade,
Ah,
maybe fourth.
I think I know who you're talking about.
He knows he can do the splits.
Okay.
And he's been able to for a long time.
Okay.
Olivia's seen this man
Okay.
at a bar
Yep.
drop it like it's hot,
Yep.
straight into the splits in front of females he's courting.
How's that work for him?
Well,
I'm genuinely curious. I'm not being a hater at all.
hard to say. Hard to say.
Interesting.
We'll have to have him on sometime.
I don't think anyone, well, maybe people our age would be impressed, but
True. I don't think any. There might have been a couple dudes that went up and said, "Dude, that's awesome."
Okay.
I don't know if there was any chicks that
That's
actually.
what, but he wasn't trying to do that so the dudes could compliment him, was he?
I'm gonna be honest. If I was a chick watching, I'd be like, "This is weird."
But I would go up to him and high five him.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
so he's attracting dudes.
He's attracting dudes.
Okay.
And that might be why, certain things have happened in his life. But I was just wondering if that was a thing where if you can do the splits, you have to show people at the dance club.
You really,
On a chair.
you really
Two
do.
chairs.
2 chairs.
It brings back the kind of the scene from the remake of Starsky and Hutch with Ben Stiller when he was in that dance off with Disco Stew.
Yeah.
Kind of got to do it if you can do it.
Okay. I just need a doctor's opinion on that.
Yeah. That's my official opinion.
Okay. So you were talking about
So let's talk about this as an example. The side splits,
side
right?
splits, yeah.
Otherwise known, whatever dating technique you're using. But,
Okay.
okay.
I like it. We'll call it the Zeus.
The Zeus. Okay, I know where you're going with that. Okay. So can you do them?
No. So I just said I have good mobility,
Right.
but my flexibility is not garbage, but in certain areas it's not that very good. If I tried doing like sitting there and like I just spread. I can only do like this.
My question is to you, Bill, if you stood up by this table, which is about waist height, you can stand to the side of it and put one leg on top of the table and stand up straight.
Like standing.
In other words, if you had your left hip and you were facing the wall and you had your left hip to the table, scoot out a little bit, you could throw that left leg up on the table, no problem.
Yes.
Right. You could turn around and then throw that right leg up on the table, no problem too.
Yes.
Okay, which is close to 90 degrees. Or you could even a higher table, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you can do that,
like this.
Yeah. No. If you were standing out,
crossed.
Yeah. If you were but sideways. Nope. Gosh, dude, it's like freaking. Yes. Now, if you backed away from the table and you stuck your foot out, your leg out straight, sideways. Yeah.
Oh, that's hard.
Okay. But what angle is that? That's a pretty decent angle.
I'm getting close to 90.
Right. So, and you could probably do the same thing on the other side. Yeah. I'm not saying you have to do it, but okay.
He does not have matching socks.
Okay.
This is hard though.
It's hard. I got it. But you can do that.
Yeah.
If you measured the angle of each one of those, let's just say it's 80 degrees. Okay? Well, what's 80 plus 80? 160.
160.
Right. Can you do 160 degree full splits?
No.
That's right. Why? Does that make any sense anatomically? Is there something in the kind of the taint area that prevents that?
Well,
no, the answer is no.
Oh, okay.
Not just for you, for everyone. I'm not trying to say something bad about,
My mom will call you and tell you rude if you do that again.
Okay, we'll do it again. My point is that doesn't make any sense if you can bring one leg up to 90 degrees, the other leg up to 90 degrees, but then you can't do the full splits. That's my point on because the brain does not feel safe and strong for you to be able to do that.
Yeah, it almost felt like it was a joint issue.
Right. It's typically not. Okay, there are some instances where there are some arthritic joint. There are some joint restrictions, capsular restrictions too. But in general, for a healthy person, 90 plus 90 doesn't equal 180. Okay, in this thing. So that's my point with this is now if I had you start slowly from a standing position and let's start building strength in that end range split position, whatever it is for you, then slowly we would build strength in those positions to the point where we'd start adding connective tissue, all those adaptations that happen with strength training. And then the nervous system would say, okay, I'm going to start letting go of this stretch reflex a little bit. Okay, you'll lose that tension because it feels safe. Doesn't feel like you're going to rip something. I did rip. One of the things that really got me on this big time is I tore my adductor. And the way I rehabbed it, believe it or not, is we talked about it a little bit during the soft tissue injury podcast, but I used a lot of these principles that we're going to talk about.
Does that tear happen because when it goes into that protective response, it's contracting and
correct, and then the force overcomes the
tears.
contraction and tears? Because my stretch reflex was on, and I spent the first 4 weeks after that injury of trying to reset that stretch reflex because it was like, nope, it was super guarded, right? And it turned it way, way up, right? Because it was under threat still. So not only have I fully rehabbed it, but now I have much better mobility in that than I did because I'm working this end range strength. So for instance, you probably remember in our some of our warm-ups, we'll be in a kneeling position, then we'll put one leg out, just one leg out for the splits. And then what's Andrew said? Okay, we're going to ramp it up to 20%, then 40%, 60%
The extended
strength.
leg is...
We're pushing into the floor, into the mat. Because we're using this one leg at a time to try to build end range strength in that adductor. And we do that on both sides.
Yeah.
So, and then you notice after we do that, that's called an isometric. We probably should review what isometric means. Isometric strength training, and I talked about this when we were doing our soft tissue podcast, does injuries. It is a contraction without the joint moving. It's the best way to say it. So if I'm like pushing against an immovable object, I'm still generating as much force as I can, but I'm not opening or closing a joint. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like sitting there with your leg out straight and just trying to contract as hard as you can. The leg isn't moving. Mm-hmm. That's an isometric contraction.
Okay.
So that's what the PAILS, the PAI, that's what the I is in PAILS, is the isometric. So the example is, so we have left knee down and we're kicking our right leg out straight, directly out to the side of us, almost like a half split. Mm-hmm. Then we're taking that right foot and we're ramping up to 100% contraction, trying to push that into the ground. And we're hold. Remember, we say, let go. Then we try to raise that leg from that position. Mm-hmm. And what happens to a lot of people? They cramp, right?
Yeah.
So we're using that opposing muscle, which
most people can only lift.
That's right.
Most people actually can't lift their foot off the mat. But if you can, it's typically only an inch.
Tiny bit. That's the rails. That's the regressive part. So where the PAILS is where we're working on that opening angle. Mm-hmm. The rails, we're working on that opposite muscle, the one that lifts it, right? And it's at a very shortened position. And it's not used to activating in that super shortened position. That's why muscles cramp like that. That over time, if you train that range too, that opening range on the opposite side of the joint, that's going to get strong too. So they're going to work together to be able to get you more usable mobility such that you could stand up in an ideal situation and do a Hicks and Gracie. Lift that leg up. You've seen him do that, like in the movie Choke, where he could lift his leg up straight. Yeah, and that was under his own power.
Right.
So that's true mobility. He can control that range throughout the full range through muscular force.
Maybe silly question.
Yeah.
But what's the benefit of having better mobility?
Well, let's think about that. For me, it probably would have prevented my injury because I would have had strength in that end range. My nervous system would have been like, that's fine.
This is more than just grappling. This is
totally.
Let's say our parents are listening.
Yeah.
Shout out to parents.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If they were stretching, they could have longevity.
Squatting.
Well,
yeah.
Have you ever gotten, like, have you ever heard someone say they got in a position they couldn't get up from?
Yeah.
Perfect example, right? They're unable to generate force from that, let's say a deep squat.
Yeah, when you get older and like people struggle to,
right?
But they're only 50.
That's in my age. I know it's true.
Yeah,
it falls off quick.
Honestly, even 40s.
Oh, it's a sad state of affairs out there for the general population.
We just watched something, and it was like probably early 40-year-olds.
Yep,
running.
Oh, dude, it's
like,
a shit show, man.
And we both said to each other, we don't want to be. Man, I'm damn near 40 right now.
I know,
and we don't want to like be where it looks painful to like when you're watching them.
Oh my gosh, right? Say? And all these things are. It has such carryover into longevity, injury prevention, make performance. Because if you can, let's say that I'm doing some guard retention stuff, right? And someone's whipping around doing like a Toriando or something like that. Yeah. That's probably a bad example, but some kind of
leg pummeling
where I can snag someone with my leg almost at in range and still generate force from that. That has huge benefits. And my muscle, my stretch reflex isn't going to go off where I'm pulling that muscle apart, right? Because my nervous system goes, no, we've been here and we're strong here.
So let alone just upping your game, but being able to stay on the mats and stay healthy.
Totally.
And even for life.
Absolutely. I mean, the more you can control a range of motion, a joint range of motion, fully control through. And you may have noticed some of the things I do. I don't know if you remember that warm up where I have people get into almost like a combat base, then pop up on that bottom leg. And, you have one leg folded. It's almost like you're doing like a kind of a quasi butterfly guard. You're coming in with one leg is a foot on the ground with the knee bent. The other leg's kind of folded under you.
Box.
Yeah.
Type thing,
okay.
And then you roll up over that shin.
Yeah.
Up to a.
Yeah.
And then I had people.
Like you're coming up to a wrestle.
Exactly. And then I had people come down super slow, but you find a lot of them would go plop. And I'd make fun of them.
Their butt hits the mat.
Yeah, because they can't control that range.
Yeah.
That's another example of that. If you can control that full range, I mean, especially in jiu-jitsu is like the perfect sport for this, right? To show the benefits of this, because we get into crazy joint positions.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you got in your shoulder and, kind of pulled back, but your brain's like, hey, no, I have some pretty good force here in this Kimura position. I'm not saying you shouldn't tap, but you're less likely to have that kind of muscular tendinous injury from that type of thing. Or if you're turned weird, and let's say you have an underhook and someone's whipping your body around and you're twisted, you can train this stuff with every joint you have. It's not just the legs, the hips, the shoulders, your spine too. So learning how to teach the nervous system that these ranges of motions are safe, and because of that, you're building strength in these range of motions. It's very similar to what Ben Patrick's doing in knees over toes. Okay, I mean he's basically training strength at these end ranges. Is the thing he's doing. It's not as sophisticated as the system the FRS guys have put together. So,
you're gonna ask.
Go ahead.
Oh, two things.
Yep.
One was, I heard that if you have to use your hands to get off the floor, like if you can't just like stand up without using your hands, that's bad.
It's a predictor
Of death
of
or mortality.
all-cause mortality.
Yeah.
That's getting up off the floor without your hands.
Yeah.
If you can do that, I mean, it is because what that shows you, not only do you have enough muscle strength, but you have the ability to use that strength through different ranges of motion, which are fairly difficult. I could take a 20-year-old right now, some of these video game players, and they couldn't do it either. And they're going to be a mess when they're 40 or 50.
Okay. And then the other thing is because you're talking about strength with mobility. So would good examples of that be like gymnasts? Because I think about like the iron cross. Or
Exactly.
Like, and you're like, oh my gosh. How are they not dying.
That's my point. The people would rip their lats or pecs if they tried that stuff. But that's a perfect example of being able to control this exactly what I'm talking about. Yep. Gymnasts are a really good example of that.
So basically, mobility is the ability to have strength in those end range positions and to control them, while someone who's flexible doesn't necessarily have strength. They can reach that end range, but they don't have control over it.
They don't have control over it. And that's the mantra of the FRS system, is being able to control your full range of motion and try to expand that usable range of motion to generate force out of. So now performance and injury prevention is the big deal. And it's hugely, it's such a good system the way they've done it, because they're medical folks too, and also just really brilliant strength and conditioning folks. They've really melded together to provide something for injury prevention, performance, and then also used for rehab. There's a whole way to utilize these things during rehabbing an injury too. So it's really interesting, and it's all about training the nervous system. That's what it's doing.
Maybe too early to ask, but let's say someone is not mobile.
Yep.
Not flexible. They do jiu-jitsu. Maybe they don't. Maybe they lift weights.
Yep.
Whatever. Maybe a bit overweight right now, at least. What can they do to start improving their mobility? Because maybe they're getting into their 30s, or they already mid-30s or something like that, and they want to, like, they listen to the podcast, they know the benefits of becoming more mobile, getting healthier, or maybe like we know there's a purple belt at our gym that I've come up with, and he's talked to me about my flexibility, or
what he calls flexibility, right?
Yeah. And he's asked a couple of times if I just have always been this way, or like, do I work on it, or what? And because he's very limited.
Yeah, but
what can someone like that do?
Well, first of all, what's interesting is you have some really good mobility in some positions, but there's some deficits in others.
Like severe.
Right. And so that's but you have some really useful jujitsu mobility. Right.
That's where it kind of looks like, oh, he's very mobile.
Right. But, if you noticed, with some things, I mean, I can't imagine you're already super skillful. Imagine what a monster you'd become.
Well, I mean, it took probably 2.5 years to be able to do one movement, which is the
external rotation.
Internal.
Oh, you meant, I thought the one you did well. You do external rotation very well.
Yeah.
Your internal, no, we've talked about that before.
And where you started having us about 2.5 years ago, just before Voldemort hit, and where you're in like a catcher stance, basically.
Yeah, in
like
a deep squat.
Deep squat.
Yep.
And then you start to dip, let's say your right knee down.
As you're basically loading your body weight on your left foot, and then you dip your right knee.
Yeah, and then you try to touch the inside of your right knee to the mat or to the floor.
Well,
hold.
Yep.
If these were my knees.
So you're showing your shins are straight up and down.
Yeah. If I was going to dip this knee in, I could only get to about here.
About 45.
Maybe.
Yep.
And that's with me putting my hands on the mat.
Yep.
Which is like a support for people that suck.
And by the way, that is not a mobility exercise to do as far as to really force that. Because I had this exact same conversation I had last week with one of our blue belts who asked that very question. He's like, dude, my knee hurts. I'm like, yeah, because your hips are shitty. Right. And I wasn't trying to be a jerk about it, because a knee's a hinge, right? A hip's a ball and socket. So many people have such tight hips, and I mean flexion, extension, external, internal rotation, that poor hinge of a knee is taking the brunt of it when you're trying to put yourself in these positions, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Especially those kind of what we call varus and valgus strain. In other words, that kind of side-to-side strain on a knee, right? That's how those MCL and LCL injuries happen. But he's like, yeah, of course it hurts. And you should never force it into that position. We need to build that, because that's more of an advanced type of mobility work right there, because we're trying to get that hip to honestly internally rotate. And what people are doing is they don't have that hip internal rotation, and they're trying to force it, and you're putting pressure on that MCL of the knee.
And I when we would do those stretches, once you started implementing them, I just took my lashings because everyone would make fun of me. But
it's okay.
I just would lean on my hands and get to where I could, and that was it. Didn't force it.
But the 90-90 helped,
and then there was the 90-90.
Right.
What's another way to, how do you explain that one?
So the 90-90 position, basically, just people that aren't, it doesn't help. We're not doing it here while watching it either. But if I was sitting down on my butt and I have my left leg pointing out in front of me, with my externally rotated hip, with my knee bent at a 90-degree angle kind of across my body. So I'm making like a 90-degree angle in front.
Like you were going to like sit crisscross applesauce.
Totally. But I just have my left leg in front and my right leg's trailing behind me the opposite way. Right.
Bent
so it's
at a
bent,
90.
and it's bent at an angle too. So it's making like an L in front and then a reverse L behind. Right. So that's why it's called a 90-90 position.
And we typically look towards the back foot shin area
when we're trying to do the internal rotation piece. So those of you that are listening, just type in 90-90 stretch and look at a YouTube video, and you can kind of see what we're doing. But it's not just the position, it's what we're doing in that position that's important. We load isometrically, right? That's the pails. And then we try to lift that sucker up off the ground and hover, which is the rails part of it, right?
So 2.5 years.
Yep.
I was starting from a severe deficit.
Yep.
Like probably if someone is thinking like, dude, I can't even touch my toes or nothing like that. Like I can do palms down. Very good in a lot of areas. But this notorious, one of the worst in the gym.
Yeah.
And 2.5 years later, I can do the advanced stretch.
Yes, you can.
With no hands.
Yep.
Feet are flat. I can dip that and like go side to side.
Yeah.
Completely different.
Why? Because your brain knows that it's strong in that position because you've been working it. And we've been trying to do that. I know it's very different. Andrew has been kind enough to very open-minded to allow me to kind of help out and integrate this stuff because for injury prevention and for performance and all that. And then he's gone to the certifications with me and has taken it on. I mean, he does such a fantastic job instructing this stuff now. He has a real knack for it. And it's cool, right? It's really because we're seeing these results like you're talking about here. And you're less likely to be injured now in that position, in that hip internal rotation, especially with a knee injury. You're much less likely to have a knee injury because of that now. Because the knee is the thing that gets beat up. Knees get beat up by ankles and they get beat up by hips.
Gotcha.
Okay. Low backs get beat up by hips too. Hips are so important.
I would actually notice the only times I would really notice having an issue with internal rotation is maybe someone's going for, if I'm playing knee shield, and someone tries to kind of almost get into an over-under pass.
Yeah,
so
put you into
put their leg
on your ankle and try to put you into.
Yeah, and that's kind of and it would get to the point where, I mean, I knew my body well enough that if someone started doing that, I'm immediately shrimping away,
or you're going to invert or something,
or something, because there's been times where I thought I was getting injured in the moment because
absolutely
they're going for aggressively, which is fine. But I had such a lack of mobility in that position that I could feel like it almost felt like my hips were going to blow out.
Well, that's the feeling, because that's your stretch reflex. It's like nope. And so that's the whole take home message of this is to desensitize this stretch reflex, but building strength in those end ranges so the brain will let go.
Okay. I think Olivia's had a lot of success with a couple stretches too.
Well, just doing, and I think this had to do with kettlebells and doing lateral lunges or lateral, basically that with weight.
Yep.
I can now do Cossacks a lot better than I used to be. I could not do them before, without my hands being on the ground.
You're training strength at end range.
Yeah.
And you didn't start out heavy, did you?
No.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But even just like doing like a butterfly, where you put your feet together and stuff, like even that has gotten better. Like I noticed just through doing jujitsu, a lot of mobility in my lower body has definitely improved.
I tell you, it's this has been a game changer. I can't say enough about that. Not just because Andrew and I are certified under it, but that FRS system. I mean, it's just, you guys need to look into that. They have their own version of yoga, so to speak. In other words, a sequence of movement called kin stretch. Anybody that, look that stuff up online.
And they put a lot of stuff on Instagram.
They put a lot on
if
Instagram.
You're wondering about just being able to do some stuff at home without doing certifications and stuff like.
Oh, for sure.
They have a pretty good social media that you can check.
They have excellent. So Andrew and I went to the FRC, which is the functional range conditioning, because I'm a osteopathic physician and I do hands-on kind of manual medicine. I also went to their functional release program, and then Andrew and I just did their first. We were in the inaugural class for their internal strength model, which was amazing. So I can't say enough about that. Guys, look that up, pass it around to your friends, and start working on. Find out where your problems are. If you're at our gym, just come to me or Andrew. We can kind of look at you and say, hey, you need to be working this specifically. But you can look online and look for those assessments and say, hey, I have a problem with this, and kind of look at some of those FRS Instagram, YouTube pages, and they have a lot of kind of, well, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does someone that's trying to get on the path of, maybe it's a competitor, maybe it's just someone that they're not even doing jiu-jitsu at the moment, they work out. It's someone that's just wants to get a little healthier. They understand that it's harder to get out of bed. How do any of these people get started? Where's a good start?
It's challenging. That's a really good question, because it's challenging right now. We don't have enough people. You would think a lot of people that aren't in the strength and conditioning world think that all trainers have the same knowledge base. Just like saying all doctors have the same knowledge base. They absolutely do not. And a small fraction of them have been to these type of things that understand this and how to assess and how to give you a corrective exercise to start building this stuff. It's a real challenge right now. you can look up, I think on their website, they do have people that are certified that put their name on there. They may be someone in your area. Well worth your time seeking them out if they're running a training gym. But it's tough. And that's why we're doing this podcast too, because if there's enough questions, we can do short little videos on, hey, someone had a question on hip internal rotation, right? Mm-hmm. And we could pop up a 2-minute little video on, hey, this is what you would do. Yeah. So, but really, I can tell you this is especially our aging population, you got to be doing something to load those muscles and bones, first of all.
Especially starting if you're in your 30s or something like that, it's going to just compound. Like the work that you do now affects when you're in your 40s.
Big time. And the problem is in our society is exercise is looked at as quote unquote cardio. That dominates everything. Popular culture, people are like, oh, I'm running. That's what I'm doing. Okay, but what are you strength training? Well, no, I'm a runner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Runners,
health.
Huh?
Great heart health.
Well, yeah, sure, but there's a reason why runners are injured all the time. Runners that strength train too are a lot less injured and they perform a lot better because they balance out some of these things. Mm-hmm. It's a topic I'm really passionate about because I see this all the time. If I had to pick one thing to do as someone aging, it would be strength training. Period. You do get a cardiovascular benefit from it too, but I tell you that's all cause mortality is frailty, which is sarcopenia, which is muscle wasting, and osteoporosis is the bone wasting, right? Mm-hmm. And it's due to not loading these things, especially over 40. You start dropping like a stone with muscle mass, right? And it's a big deal if you don't keep it up. I can tell you personally, I have a much harder time. I have to I train jiu-jitsu 3 times a week, and Carrie's a former power lifter, right?
Right.
And we're still, just today we got another kind of, we got a mobility workout, but people are like, oh, you're just stretching. No, this is strength training. Mm-hmm. That is the shift in our minds we got to make now. Mobility work is strength training. Like Carrie was sick at her stomach today, just from the neurologic hit we did today. Almost like a heavy deadlift session, that kind of thing. Because we were really doing a lot of good inputs to the nervous system today under the mobility, quote unquote. And it is strength training. It's just a different strength training that people are used to doing.
Gotcha. I got a question. Yeah. I don't know if he just asked this, but so let's say someone's like, okay, I want to try doing this FRS type style mobility training. How often should they be doing it? For how long? How long do they hold each stretch? This type of
That's
thing.
a great question. There's no way we could kind of cover that, and it's individual to what people need. I don't want, as a good trainer, I'll put on my trainer hat now, I'm not my doctor hat. If Bill came to me saying, hey man, I want to get on a training program, and you did too, and then I've trained a lot of people in our gym, they all need different stuff. Okay? They all need different, you concentrate on different things, because we all like to work our stuff that we're good at. Mm-hmm. You would get much more benefit in working those things that you have holes in your game. Mm-hmm. As far as injury prevention and all that. But giving you sets and reps and all that, it's impossible. Because it also depends on your capacity. I would could train a lot more often, a lot more inputs than someone in their 60s that needs this, right? So there's a lot of the individuality. I know why you're asking that question, because it's a really good one, because people want a cookie cutter response. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They do.
They want to be like, oh,
the
15
problem,
minutes a day.
Well, that's why I haven't sold a 15-minute abs book, right? Because it's nonsense, right? And people, and you look at
abs to be able to sell that kind of stuff.
That's a fair point. Although I'm getting a 4-pack back, so I'm not quite there. I'm doing better.
See how Christmas looks.
It's going to be ugly, but that is something that there's a reason why the diet industry makes billions of dollars. There's a reason why gyms in January make a whole lot of money. People want a quick cookie cutter answer, and it's just not that.
Do you recommend a shake weight?
The shake weight? I mean, it depends what your goals are. Do you want to get really good at shake weighting or something that would transfer directly? Then it may be a good one for you. I don't know.
Well, I have a job interview at the Golden Massage on Highway 99. So
Then I think that would be, what do we call it? The SAID principle, specific adaptations to imposed demands. So if that's a motion that you want to get good at, then I think go for it, dude. And for you, make sure you're ambidextrous too.
thank you.
Okay.
Parking in the rear.
I could go so many.
You ever seen those? You ever
Oh,
drive
I
on 99?
have.
Okay.
I was in the Navy, dude.
Okay.
Come on now, man.
Yeah, you've dabbled enough.
I had to give up. Well, that is alleged. I had to give briefs when we pull into Barcelona, Spain.
Like whitey tighties?
No, like a talk to people,
I
briefing.
thought you were handing out briefs. Like,
Well, probably should have done that too. But like, hey, folks, before you go out there, right?
look for an Adam's apple.
These are, well, just so yeah. I've had experience.
There are diseases
Yes,
that you can get from other humans.
yes, among other things.
among other things. Okay.
Yeah.
You know what?
Mobility.
So, yeah.
Because you're talking about the whole cookie cutter thing.
Yeah.
I was just talking to Bill about this the other day, and the whole, but not with mobility, but just like weight training in general.
Yeah.
And how they always sell this lie about how, oh yeah, 3-month shred, 90-day shred, blah blah blah, and you're like, nobody's getting shredded in 90 days. Like,
And most of shredding has to do with diet.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but it's this lie that the fitness industry sells of, you can have this body which someone's been building for 9 years.
It maybe has amazing genetics too.
Yeah, and genetics.
Yeah.
Yes, well, that lie too. And in 30 days, in 60 days, in 90
You know why they keep doing it?
Because people keep believing it.
They buy it
Yeah.
because they want instant gratification.
Yeah, and it's like realizing, just like
Look.
with jujitsu, anything that you want is going to take time and patience and consistency and hard work.
I don't mind those programs if they're kind of a gateway drug to a good lifestyle change. Right.
Yeah.
But that in itself, I mean, it's disingenuous. Carrie and I talk about all the time how we could make, a ton of money if we were not ethical as doctors and biochemists. But we talk about like, oh, we're going to launch this line of freaking weight loss shakes or something like that, right? I mean, it's just not ethical.
On genetics I'm pretty like especially if I work like after jiu-jitsu. I would say I'm pretty vascular. Like, is that a genetic thing?
You've gotten to develop some leanness because before
It's gotten more for sure.
more
like,
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, you know where things are, how close your vessels are, your skin, your how much fat you're carrying, and all that makes a difference.
I mean, but I think I'm probably like, we were just talking about this, like, I assume like 11-ish% body fat.
I don't know.
Right. But I mean, just like guessing.
Yeah.
Like, but I feel like I'm more vascular than a lot of people.
You might be.
Is vascularity typically a genetic?
I think it is to an extent, just like eye color, hair color, vessel size, arm. Some people have big calves, right? I think like people always use it. I mean, you have the same comments too. I haven't worked my calves. They for whatever reason. I know some super athletes who have small calves. They can't grow them.
Right.
I think it's a lot to do with that. Yeah.
Well, I asked because I've been asked like about like becoming more vascular. I'm like,
Why?
Jeez. Well, I think because if you, let's say,
Like, why are people asking him?
No, but why would you want to be?
well, I think it's because, let's say you have my fitness level, as in composition visually,
Okay.
and then, but I wasn't very vascular, and then you have how I am, especially right after a workout, like I'm really vascular. The vascular person looks way buffer or more in
I
shape.
see.
Maybe not buff.
I think
'Cause
it's
I'm not-
tied to fitness because the
Yeah.
fitness industry has made it tied to fitness.
The bodybuilder thing too.
Yes.
Right.
So it like visually, it just looks more like whoa.
People associate it.
Yep.
Yeah.
people genetically that go into those things typically have vascularity like that.
Yeah.
I think there's a big genetic component. But I will tell you this: so you get someone. If you ever looked at the story behind, you've seen the movie 300, right? Okay, you remember those guys? Everyone's like, "Oh, they got jacked." They're not really that big. If you ever looked at them, Mark Twight, who was the trainer that trained those guys, when you during his interview with them, he got them lean, and they look jacked because they're lean, even though they're not, hugely muscled.
Primarily in the torso.
Yeah,
Like,
There's something about somebody who has abs, even if they don't have buff defined arms.
Yep.
Abs always make someone look fit, but someone could be really like jacked in their muscles but not have abs, and it doesn't look as fit.
That's right.
It's weird.
kind of the Gordon Ryan thing is like, he's not like, I mean, now he's pretty big, but he's typically always been, 195 pounds, 200 pounds, but he has like such a genetically shredded, and ab insertions are super deep. So his torso just is crazy. He came from a very skinny kid to, putting on size, but he maintained that genetically gifted torso. So he just looks way more like crazy, I think, than maybe he actually is. I mean, he's put on a lot more size now. He's 235 pounds.
Yeah.
But when he was 88 kilo division,
Right.
99 under, it was like, you see him next to someone like Muhammad Ali, the jiu-jitsu guy.
No, I know what you're talking about.
And, he's like really jacked and just a huge person in general. So it was just kind of different. But it made like a visual kind of...
Well, of course. Look at Yoel Romero.
Yeah.
From, MMA.
Right.
A genetic freak, right? Obviously a hardworking athlete too, but I mean, there are people that have those. They just I'm not freaking 6'2".
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta.
You're barely above 5'2".
Don't make us measure. That's what short people always do.
You'll wait till the morning.
Bro, I'm 5'9", man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I just woke up real good. I'm 5'9" this morning.
Yeah, I know.
Bill would say 5'10" in the morning.
I am 5'10" in the morning.
Well, people do grow overnight.
Yeah, that's why I'm 5'10" in the morning.
Very, very, very microscopically. The discs actually hydrate, especially when you're younger. Your disc will hydrate, and just by millimeters, you will have, I
mean, I'll dispute that. I'm solid. I might even be 5'11".
You're full of it.
Oh,
dude.
okay. Not even. Close.
You don't know. You're not awake when I get up.
I'm almost as tall as you.
No, oh, wow. Well, this is devolving, dude. We're all going to get in a fight about who's taller than a bunch of short people. So, no, my point is, though, there's a lot of genetic components to that.
Okay.
But, we can always, we want to optimize what we have.
Yeah.
And get better. And, if we see obviously we're not going to grow as far as height, but, as far as, mobility, strength, and all that, we can absolutely optimize that.
This is why I tell Bill he needs to start pumping some iron.
No, I hope he doesn't, because I am now, and it's going to be, we'll just see the difference here soon.
Well, it's too bad, because I'm dropping a training day, a jiu-jitsu training day, and it's going to be a lifting day.
I love it, dude. I'm just messing with you.
So
I know. I told him. I said.
I told Andrew
Andrew's
we were
getting stronger than you. You have to catch up.
Well, I told Andrew that you and I were going to be lifting more now, and he was like, "Oh."
So I can have my twinkle toes movement, but also be strong,
Jacked and strong. Yeah, that's what it's all about, anyway, right?
Yeah, basically, that's what it's all about. Smashing Andrew.
Dude, I'm going to distance myself from that comment because I don't want to get
that's
the ire of Andrew.
That's our goal. We need to,
dude,
as senpais, we need to try to take the scalp of our sensei.
I don't know if you realize how nice he is when he rolls with us typically.
I do, because whenever I catch him, he's not nice anymore.
That's right. And then you figure out what happens.
Yeah. Then he passes my guard in 10 seconds and armbars me.
Exactly.
So on Saturday.
I'm very happy with our little interactions right now, mine and Andrew. So.
Oh. Well,
I feel like I'm getting better, but I have a healthy respect. I know if he turned it up, I would be in trouble. So, and that's good.
Yeah.
good. That humility there.
I like to poke the bear.
I know you do, and I like watching you poke the bear even more so. Is that how you guys get the gist of what we're talking about with the mobility thing now? Was that helpful?
Yeah.
Kind of what we're just trying to get that desensitize that stretch reflex, gain some more tissue and adaptations at those end ranges to generate force.
And so mobility, though, you said like the sensitivity of that stretch resistance is genetic as well. Like for some reason, or why do some people have more sensitivity than other people?
It depends. Previous injuries, or let's say if I sit at a desk all day long and I'm in the shortened position of my hip flexors constantly. Well, my brain's like, well, I don't need any more length than that. And that stretch reflex is then set even lower.
Okay.
Right? Then you have to overcome that. It's a thing that varies. Depends on what demands or non-demands you're imposing upon your body.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you
Some people that you know are like, wow, how are they flexible? Typically, they've been doing stuff since childhood.
Yeah.
Like that they've developed that and they've stuck with it, right? And then they've carried that through to adulthood. That's why some of these kids doing jiu-jitsu now that are really, they're super limber. If they keep doing it, they're going to be like crazy good as far as their mobility goes.
The guy I know that does the splits in the bar, he did Taekwondo as like competitively when he was younger.
That's exactly. And so they've developed those end range strength as they were going through puberty. And so that's kind of been ingrained in the nervous system. The nervous system grew up thinking, well, that's safe.
Oh,
right?
I did have something.
Yeah.
I actually was watching a YouTube video on some mobility stuff.
Yep.
And they were saying, because Bill had mentioned like feeling like his joint was, or like his hip bone or a joint was in the way, that sometimes you do have to like externally rotate to get a bone out of the way.
So
sometimes it can
with a hip,
prohibit.
there's sometimes, we call it femoral acetabular impingement. That hip, that just means the femur, and the acetabulum is the place where the ball, it's the socket for the ball and socket, basically, of the hip. Some people have the roof of that extends down. It is anatomic, where they don't have as much room because of that. That is a thing, where there is a component in that. And I would have to look at an x-ray of your hip to see if you have that, that it's called FAI.
That roof.
But if you like externally rotated, that would help to move it so that it wasn't
you move the
scraping or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. You move the head of the femur around to allow it to clear it a little better. Yeah, exactly. So that's called hip impingement.
We had a question from last week.
Okay.
A white belt, I think it was, that you had mentioned that we want to remind you about.
Oh, yeah.
Was that the one, should a white belt be teaching?
Another white belt?
I think that might have been.
Did we talk about that?
No, we were going to do it
was
today.
when or is it appropriate? Is it appropriate for a white belt to teach another?
Did we talk about this off
belt
after the podcast? That's why I have it in my head that we talked about it.
I mean, we talked about it twice of like, we should talk about it.
Oh, okay.
We never did.
I'm old, man. I can't remember when I actually talked about anything.
We all know.
I know. So, yeah. And I think when we talked about this offline, I think,
So what was the exact question?
When is it like when is it appropriate, or is it appropriate for a white belt to teach another white belt?
Yeah, my thought was, I had a scenario where not teaching, maybe helping out a little bit with, if let's say that you're your training partner for that class, and let's say that you've been to 3 classes that week, and we, like in our academy, Andrew will work a position and he'll sequence that, and we'll work that through a week or 2, right? Let's say that one white belt's been there 3 days in a row, has gone over it and made a bunch of mistakes and got corrected. And then he's there on a 4th day with someone new that hadn't been to class at all, and they're trying to kind of struggle through it. And he's like, hey, this is what he showed me. I was doing this. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As long as it's really important to know what you don't know. And as white belts, you don't. I can tell you right now, as a brown belt, I know what I don't know, and what I don't know is expanding. The more I learn about jiu-jitsu, the more I realize I don't know a ton, right? As opposed to it's like that ignorance when you're coming up. So I don't think there's anything wrong with passing on something that you've already been taught recently, is fresh in your mind, and you actually know something, but don't ever pass it off. My thing is, if you're unsure about anything, the worst thing you can do is show someone something that's incorrect, have someone start building some bad habits. And, raise your hand. That's what the upper belts are for. It's what the instructors are for in general. So, if you know something, you know something, but be very humble about that, in my mind. I mean, that's kind of the only scenario I can think of that.
I think I'm pretty similar. It's being able to go for it, but be able to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Be willing to, like, this, from what I know, it's this. And then if you're stuck in any part of it, just, ask an upper belt or something like that. But yeah, if you start kind of BSing yourself and the person, unfortunately what will happen is you both will start to suck more, because you're going to do you're going to do the move or the technique in not the right way, and then you're going to build a bad habit. Not
only a bad habit, but some depending on what you're learning, some things you can put yourself in a bad position and actually injure somebody.
Sure, yeah.
So I mean, it's
but it's something that I mean, it is a bit of a meme to have like white belts showing other white belts like stuff, and and there's a reason that meme exists, because it's common, but for there to be like a white belt showing another white belt how to do like a go-go plata, and it's like, what are you doing? Why are you showing this second week guy how to do a go-go plata?
Well, for sure, right? And exactly.
But I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with it. Like, kind of like what you were saying, just be humble, be able to, and even maybe you do it, and then also still ask. Maybe you're confident. Still ask and be like, hey, this is right? I'm showing this.
Absolutely is what I would agree with, right? That's why we're all there to help each other learn. Now, that's not to say that I've had, especially someone, is really into it, like a white or blue belt, and they have something that they picked up, some little piece. I'm like, oh, that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
You know what I mean? So, I mean, I think that's
actually a great example of that is I haven't looked into in detail this newer position called the false reap.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrew and I have talked about working on it, like on the side. And a white belt, he didn't know it was the false reap position, because he saw Craig Jones showed a video on it and called it something else. And so he brought it up to Andrew and I and was like, hey, what do you think about this? And I'm like, I think this is the false reap position.
Yeah.
And he was explaining like what he had saw. And there was a couple details to it that was like, oh yeah, this is cool. There's a grip in there. Anyways, just kind of an example of.
That's a good example. We're all there to learn from each other too. I'm never going to be like, oh, I can't learn anything from you because you're lower belt. But just be real. I would say be real careful and look at the culture of your gym too, because sometimes people don't like that at all when you're trying to.
Yeah, I mean, you might have an instructor that like really doesn't like it too, so you might.
And definitely don't start kind of coaching your upper belts on things, even if you're right. You got to be diplomatic about. I mean, especially people, like. Yeah, I know.
The difficult thing with that is you just never know. Like, there's a good chance an upper belt might, especially if they're going against maybe a lower belt, in a excuse me, in a sparring round. That upper belt, there's a very good chance they're working on something intentionally, or they're allowing certain things to happen. They're not getting rid of a grip intentionally because they're trying to play from behind.
Or they're trying to do a different move than what you think they're trying to do.
Oh my goodness, I did that to John Haywood. I was teaching class, and I'm walking around, and he was drilling with and they were doing something just like slightly it looked off to what we were doing. And I'm like, hey, you're not going to want to do that. And he's like, yeah, it was, she was doing this. And I was kind of and I was like, I'm an asshole. I apologize. Because I'm walking around. I don't know if they, like, Maya was asking, like, what if I put my
what if I
foot
did
here?
that?
Or,
and you'd be like,
and he was like, well, I think it might not work, but let's try it. And so they were just kind of experimenting, which I am very down for.
Yeah, totally.
But I'm walking by trying to correct them in a moment that was like a little silly. I've done that so many times, like, and it's, I still do it. But if you do that, like, understand that that's a high likelihood.
Yeah, totally.
that could be happening, that you could be interjecting when it's just not needed.
Exactly.
That goes for coaching the person you're rolling with. If you're in a spar and you're trying to teach them how to finish the move, try not to do that too often.
That might be like the worst thing. That would drive me absolutely nuts.
That can be brutal when it's...
Well, the thing is, whenever it would happen to me, it's not because I didn't know what I was doing. It's because I was still in that mode where I was overthinking. And so I would get stuck in like a spot where I just was like mentally like processing. Or, I don't know, usually that's what it was. But that was when I was like a blue belt. Now that doesn't... People don't do that to me.
The only time I'll do that is like someone's been training for 2 weeks and we happen to be rolling and then they're like, oh, and you're mounting and I'm like, okay.
You always do it to me though. Right when I'm about to get a submission, you try to walk me through it.
You're so full of crap. I've never done that to you in my life. Nor would I. I'm trying to avoid getting submitted by you.
But that's your out. You're like,
dude. Okay.
And I don't think that there's anything wrong with doing that with new people or
That's
lower
hilarious.
belts or anything like that. I'm just saying I remember that I've experienced that. And I would I felt like it took away the power of my submission.
right. Well, that's what he
Because
does.
now I was like, okay, well now it feels like you're giving it to me.
Right.
That's like what you're saying is like a pet peeve of mine. When someone does that, you're like, bro, I'm just... You're about to get submitted. Don't give me coaching.
Yeah, turn the thumb.
Yeah,
I'll let go of stuff.
Yeah, be like, all right, we'll do something
That's
else.
usually I think what I do too. I'm
That's
like, whatever.
hilarious. Oh, that's so funny.
City.
I had brought up a question prior. I'm just gonna throw it out since we're already talking about jiu-jitsu stuff. And I had asked Chris this, but when do you tap versus keep going and try to fight out of it? How do you know when to do that?
I will tell you my answer. This is let's just use an example. If someone has an arm bar, they have me cinched up where my elbow is above their fulcrum. I'm kind of dead to rights on that. I'm going to tap. It isn't worth it to me. Training. Now, if my elbow's kind of, clear a little bit, and I think I can kind of limp arm out of it, or I can maneuver.
You're saying like you're gripped up, you're in a tight armor, but you have your grips. Are you tapping as soon as they break?
No, I'm talking about no. I'm talking about, let's say from I'm in someone's guard, and they throw up a real quick arm bar on me, but they don't really have the fulcrum on my elbow. I have some space where I can just pull it out. I'm gonna of course I'm gonna fight out of that.
But I mean, how extended are you?
Oh no, I when I get my arm. When it gets extended, and most of the people, it depends on who I'm training with.
Sure.
If I'm training with you,
right,
I'll let my arm get fully extended, and then you start putting pressure on it. I'll tap. If it's someone that I don't really know, that may just kind of grip it and rip it a little bit,
or you just don't know if they will.
I don't know if they will. Yeah. I'll be a little more quick because my mindset is I shouldn't have gotten there in the first place. Okay, I made a bunch of mistakes. Left my arm dangling or something, just with that example. I shouldn't have got there in the first place. So my penance for allowing that to happen is I'm going to tap because I don't need that to happen because I'm not trying to not get submitted.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, my whole thing is I want to train again in 2 days, right? I don't want to have a jacked up elbow because I was a dummy. So
I would say I agree completely. learning your training partners, because that's who we're talking about, and how they apply submissions. Try to take note of it, especially when you're going to have this more with joint locks more than anything. For example, like an arm bar, like we were just saying. I take mental note of how people try to finish, especially arm bars and joint locks, because like you mentioned with me, you will allow maybe more extension than some other people. And part of that reason is I don't use. So when you do an arm bar, you're taught typically to like curl your heels to your butt, squeeze your knees, point the thumb, and lift your hips, right? In my opinion, and I've adopted this opinion from some prominent jiu-jitsu people, you shouldn't, if you're doing all these other parts of the arm bar right, you don't even need to lift your hips. If you have a proper knee squeeze, your hips are loaded underneath their shoulder, you have a good curl, and you pay attention to the thumb, whether it's up or I typically intentionally don't have it go up, but you should be able to finish the arm bar. And so if I have your arm and you're extended here, and pay attention to someone as when they're trying to submit you. If I have 2-on-1, and Chris tries to bring his arm he's going to try to curl, and I'm going to start pulling him, and I'm trying to finish, and there's this easy tension where he's trying to move his wrist, he's trying to miss the fulcrum on his elbow by just manipulating where his thumb is pointed, and I'm just going to kind of hold that and keep tension on it the whole time without even lifting my hips. What I find is where you start to come into some danger is when someone has that tension and then they start lifting their hips, which is putting the pressure right on the fulcrum.
That's right.
So everything else is static. The only thing that's moving is my actual grip on your wrist, and then keeping that tension to where, okay, you can't hitchhiker, you can't, what I call a Caesar, where you like go thumbs down, go to the other side. You tried scissoring your legs and coming up to stack. You can't do it. You're done.
Well, and that's why with you, especially, or some of our black belts and upper belts, I will wait to see if I have an opportunity while they're making an adjustment, if they make a mistake, to try to retract it. And that's why I let it go longer. But if it's someone, a perfect example, when I was a new purple belt, we had the guy just come into the gym, another purple belt I've never seen before, never been back since. And, the culture of our gym is, especially upper belts, that, you put on, especially a joint lock, you do it. You get the position, and then you slowly kind of put that in there. This dude is like ADCC finals, man. Grabbed a Americana on me and just ripped it. And that's why, to this day, and that's why I have adhesive capsulitis in my shoulder right now. And I was really angry.
Oh, yeah.
Because they should have known better and just kind of gripped it and ripped it, right? Instead of like, I was tapping as it was crunching my shoulder.
Shoulder locks are almost, in my opinion, in a different category. Than I put them almost in not knee bar, twisting leg lock category.
Like heel hook stuff. Yeah. Dude, there's no joke, man. Kimura's and
because there can be, one of the reasons that heel hooks are looked at as being more dangerous is there's not a whole lot of pain, and then there's catastrophic injury. Right?
Very quickly.
Right. And the amount of rotation in a heel hook is like, we're fine. Oh, now there's tension. Crack.
We're not fine at all. Yep.
A Kimura or a
key lock
Americana can be very similar, or a Barata Plata or something like that. Barata Plata is it's the same thing.
Same idea.
It's a slower movement, right? The body mechanics in it. But Kimura, Americana, key lock, they have a lot of movement until this very end range, and then it can be catastrophic.
Well, and me especially, I don't have a great shoulder mobility, right? No, exactly.
So if someone were to rip one of those techniques, heel hook, Americana, Kimura, your injury rate can go so high. Like it can be like just
I had a volcano going off in my head,
Oh, I
man.
bet.
It was really close to really, but
Yeah.
the decorum of the gym demanded that I not freaking just go nuts on that guy.
right. Yeah.
But yeah, and just but I will tap early and often.
Yeah. No, so knowing your training partner
Yep.
is gonna be a huge part. But being cognizant of it, take note when you're being submitted, like when they got your arm, were they like really trying to rip on it? Like, I understand I have a couple people that really try to rip on mine, but I know that.
You know it.
I know Hunter's gonna go for my scalp. So if he gets an arm lock or a joint lock, I know if I get to my end range, don't push it.
Right.
Because he's putting effort, and it's totally fine. I'm not going to be mad at him.
Right.
Unless I feel like it's spazzy.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand he's going to put in a lot of effort into that finish.
Right.
And I'm going to do the same to him. And that's totally fine. But then if you don't know the person, protect yourself. Just protect yourself.
Yeah. That's what it's all about, right?
Yep.
I mean I think it's a really good question, and it's not to me it's just not worth it.
And find the controlled partner.
Yes.
And find your limits.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's another thing is through training, especially through Voldemort times, when everything was shut down and we were having a lot of small group time with Andrew,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm able to really figure out how much rotation
Mm-hmm.
or whatever do I have in these deep submission positions.
For sure.
And so work that stuff with the right partner.
Right. And you've noticed if you grab my left shoulder,
Yeah.
I mean, you're always cognizant. You're like, hey, Ben, your shoulder okay?
Yeah.
Dude, it's so appreciated. But I mean, and I tap real early when I get into that position. Man, it's okay. I just know I need to protect that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, it is. So I have one last question.
One last question? Okay.
Yep. And it has to do with a little bit of the stretching kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Doc, what are your thoughts on implementing a specific breathing protocol, either post-workout or after a night of sparring? Would it be beneficial to aid in the recovery process? And if so, what type of breathing exercises would you recommend, and for how long?
That's an awesome question, near and dear to my heart. So recovery can be a trainable thing too. So first of all, after class, I think is great, but you could even consider doing this between rounds. So let's say you're a competitor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Typically, if you're competing, you at least have one match between your last match. They typically were not going to have you come off the mat and immediately go into another one.
Right.
Right. But you may have just one in between.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you really want to work on this after a hard roll, take that 6 minutes or whatever your round is, the round timer's on, get against the wall somewhere and start especially breathing. You can do, there's so many ways to do this. You can do the box breathing. You're familiar with that? Where all that means is all the cycles are about even, forming a box. So you'll do like a 6-second inhale through your nose, diaphragmatically, not filling up your chest, but trying to fill, imagine trying to breathe down into your belly.
Stomach.
Yep. Hold for 6 seconds.
So 6-second in.
Yep. Hold for 6 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
6-second exhale.
Mm-hmm. Nose, mouth, doesn't matter.
Yeah. Mouth, just very slow and controlled. And then at the end of that, before you inhale again, try to do a 6-second.
So you've expelled all the air, and now you're holding 6 seconds.
Yep. And then 6. That's box breathing.
Okay.
People do something called 3-4-8, where they'll do 3-second inhale, 4-second hold, and then a long exhale, like an 8-second exhale. All these things are, especially this nasal breathing, you're trying to increase the parasympathetic nervous system, the opposite of the flight or fight. to bring down your heart rate, energy conservation. And you can do this. Get ready on your butt, and I'll reference the book I wrote. I actually had a
book?
Yeah, weird. It's called the burst cardio protocol, where you wouldn't have a set amount of, let's say we're doing Tabata intervals on a bike, like those HIIT, high intensity interval training, where you would do, let's say just 30, the classic Tabata is 20 seconds on full, and then you just do 10-second recovery. What I was trying to do in that section with this protocol is not have a set time for the recovery. You recover when your heart rate, it's based on heart rate. So you would go as hard as you could till you reach your target heart rate. Then you would stop, and then you would wait until you got your heart rate down low to a certain predetermined level, and then you could start another one. That helps you prevent overtraining too. Because let's say you had a night of bad sleep, and I illustrated this. I did an experiment on myself where I had a graph where I did that same protocol one day where I had good sleep and I felt really great. And you saw I got more rounds in because I was able to drop my heart rate faster and then get another round in, then drop my heart rate fast again, and then get another round. Where I had a bad sleep, my heart rate was not dropping fast, right? Because my sympathetic nervous system, it's that whole stress cup thing, right? Where my sympathetic nervous system just wasn't letting go, even with the breathing. But what you can do with this is you can train this with a specific goal where you can do a hard round, then immediately go off to the side, start breathing, and see how fast you can kind of get that heart rate back down. Almost use it like a competition thing with yourself, or like see what method of breathing works, whether it's box breathing, whether it's the longer exhales, but always through the nose diaphragmatically, and to see if you can kind of reduce that heart rate. And you'll end up being able to train it so then you can reduce it faster over time. You'll have more control over that nervous system, which is all about. So I think it's a great idea. It's great for after training to try to calm down the system. Let's say you're training at night and you want to go to bed, right? You don't want that kind of flight or fight system going. Yeah. So it's a great idea to do after training too. I love it. I think it's a great idea during your rolls. If you're in a position, let's say unfortunately you've gotten someone's on heavy side control on you, and you're kind of, okay, I'm figuring how am I going to get out of this? You're waiting on them to shift their weight to make your move. You can really do the breathing, kind of the Hicks and Gracie kind of breathing, circumferentially all around, like breathing down into the mat with your back. You've heard me talk about that before. Yeah. So you can do this kind of stuff for energy conservation even during your roll too. So it's a really good thing to get into. I think it's a great idea. You can look up there's so many variations on this theme. Yeah. Some work better than others. Some people really like the box breathing.
So maybe try in between your rounds.
Yeah, I would, and just do it for the full round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, if you're going to do like a round off.
Yeah.
Like just do it.
Especially if you're training competition. I would argue a lot of people, this kind of goes into another question. This is just my opinion. A lot of people like, oh, we got to do all these consecutive grounds to build up your, to build up your cardio and all that. Okay. And it might also, and something like that will help like kind of mental toughness too. Just kind of just getting Shark Tanked and, just sucking it up, going all those consecutive rounds. But my mind is, if you can train like you're going to compete, because if you take a round off but you can go a lot harder during those rounds, your intensity level for each round will be higher than if you did consecutive rounds, and you can spend that time really learning how to train your nervous system on those off rounds. And then go super hard again if you're training, getting ready for competition, because that's how you would compete anyway. Right. And I think you're going to get more out of those rounds than you would, unless you're trying to build just mental toughness, right? Sure. And just getting, feeling right. But that's just kind of my opinion on that. It just kind of goes into that. I think it's useful for a lot of ways. I'm a big fan. There's a really good book. The Hickson book, which is really good a great biography. But there's also Dang it. Why am I not pulling the guy's name?
Snickers.
It's called Breath.
Nestor?
James Nestor. Yeah, that's a fantastic book talking about the physiologic benefits of certain types of breathing. Really, really good. I highly recommend that. Thank you for helping me remember that.
It's funny. You were just talking about like during rolls, like trying to do that. Now, I haven't specifically tried to do a certain type of breathing, but one thing that I noticed out of nowhere that I've started to do when I've been trying to work on my mindset is when I'm in a position where maybe the other person is not necessarily moving, or I'm just kind of like in a guarded position.
Yep.
I sit there and I remember like, okay, calm down. And I start breathing through my nose.
Yep.
And it makes a world of difference in calming me down and then helping me to re-energize.
Absolutely. And that's what I was getting at. That energy conservation piece is really, really important.
Just a couple seconds.
Doesn't take much.
I don't know why it does though. It makes
even
a
if you get a
difference.
dominant position on someone and you've had a rough scramble,
Yeah.
and you're cooking them in side control, you can do it on top too. Just
I actually had that today. I was sparring with how big was that dude in the white gi?
It was a big dude.
Yeah, 260.
Jeez.
Something like that.
Okay.
Big guy. Same with the dude right after him. He was freaking huge too.
Wow.
But I swept, and he was, really active right from the
bottom
sweep, and I went to north south, and
I think I saw that. I saw you take a moment to recoup.
Because as he should, he wasn't conceding right away.
Right.
He was using that transitional moment to try to re-guard, wrestle up,
Totally.
or something.
Yeah.
So I got a couple dominant grips and just tried to because I was breathing pretty heavy at that moment, and just hold, and then as soon as he started calming down, just keep my dominant grips, keep my good low base, good chest to chest, and just regain. And it was only, I don't know, 5 seconds or something like that.
It makes a
10
difference
seconds.
though, man.
It does.
Yeah.
And then I could then start moving into knee on belly, working, setting up a Bravo or something.
Well, I think it's a mental mindset reset or something that I think for me more than anything, like with the breathing, almost like I'm telling myself okay, you're safe, you can calm down. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly.
Just that little mental switch and the breathing, makes a huge difference.
Try something. It's a great thing. Try taking a round off after a hard round and just really trying to breathe.
Yeah, I'll have to try that.
It's really, really interesting how
do that.
effective it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I love that question.
Shout out Jared for asking it.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't surprise me. He asks great questions.
Yeah, it surprised me a little bit.
You're such a butt, Bill.
Email questions to grapplingwithpodcast@gmail.com or the Instagram page, Facebook. Give us a review or something on any of the platforms,
That'd be helpful.
even YouTube.
Yeah, when you put up in the video next time.
I am less than a man.
No, dude, I'm giving you a hard
been
time.
bad. It's been
That's a
bad.
lot of work, man.
It's been bad.
We're going to have here very soon a really cool podcast coming up with about law enforcement and jiu-jitsu with just someone that has a wealth of knowledge.
Yep.
So
He's
it should be super cool.
been on the force for decades, and he's
Military,
training.
law enforcement, the whole 9 yards. So we're going to have him on very, very soon. So it's going to be cool.
Yeah. So if you have questions actually pertaining to that, even if it's even if it's hot button kind of issues, we're an open book. We're willing to talk about all that kind of stuff. If you listen to my old podcast where I did one with Rashawn.
Oh, right. That's a great one.
He's an officer as well. And we didn't skirt away from some of the hot button stuff. So if you have any questions for that, please send them in.
I love it. Excellent.
Okay.
Thanks, Olivia.
See y'all.
All right.